Okay, welcome to our fragmented weekend Bucky call. We're celebrating Manu's birthday. Happy birthday, Manu.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if we were all here, we'd all be singing happy birthday to you. Now, when I sing, and I'm gonna embarrass myself because my grandkids have a birthday, here's how I sing it. It's Manu's birthday. Happy birthday, Manu. Happy birthday to you. Happy
Thank you.
birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Manu. Happy birthday to you. Happy
Wow,
birthday,
that's my
Manu.
first. Yes,
I do
that's the
that for my
first wish.
grandkids,
That's the
Manu.
first wish of the day for me
Yeah,
here.
yeah, you're 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard remembered it was your birthday. Richard, thank you for being so gracious. Okay, so for Richard's birthday, we're going to celebrate by showing a graph an animation that Richard found showing n squared minus n divided by 2 or n times n minus 1 divided by 2, the number of relationships in a that evolved from a number of nodes. And so we're going to show a video that Richard found, and then I built a little chart on it. And then we've been talking about it in amongst ourselves, and uh, and we have some things to note. So here we go. I'm going to start the video, and then off to the right, you're going to see um, the number of relationships. Okay, here comes 2. All right. Here comes 3. Here comes
Mhm,
4.
mhm.
Comes 5. Boy, that's fast. And this is running half speed. Here comes 6. Here comes 7. I'm going to be quiet now. It's obvious what's happening. And I think that I can talk a little bit now. What we noticed was when n is an uneven number, a polygon appears in the center of the diagram, and we've counted. The number of sides in the polygon are equal to the number of n. When n is an even number, a starburst shows in the center of the diagram, and there are the number of spokes in the starburst are equal to n. So it rotates between even number, a polygon, odd number, a starburst. Nope, it's wrong. Even
Other
number,
way around.
a polygon, odd number, a starburst. Even number, a polygon, odd number, a starburst. And then Manu figured some stuff out from there. Let's let this run and we'll freeze it and talk about it. N is even. We have a starburst. Oh, I went to sleep on identifying the number of nodes here. Okay. N equals 20. And I'm going to send a link to this graphic, which Richard so kindly submitted to me. And I'm going to give you the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet, we went ahead, Richard and I built the spreadsheet down to 100. So with 100 nodes, um, you have your number. And then if you want more than that, well, you can just take the spreadsheet formula and spread it out. Okay, so here is N equals 20. And any comments or questions?
It depends on where do you want us to start with. Do you want us to
Energy,
start
where
with
whatever happens.
philosophy, belief, and thing? Or do you want us to just go to
I don't
to
know.
to to
Maybe Richard, you can talk about where you found this and what it meant to you, and then Manu can give us the topological understanding of what it is.
Well, it came to me from either a Facebook or a LinkedIn posting by somebody. Um, and when I first saw it, I recognized immediately that it was a visualization of the formula. Um, and I sort of jumped the gun in thinking that it was showing not only the number of ends through the sequence, but it was showing the number of connections or relationships. And it was just today that I realized it didn't show the answer. And that's why I brought it up this evening um, with Steve. And out of that, because we were on the line together by ourselves, so we got to play around, and we ended up developing the graph or the spreadsheet so that you could see the answer to each of the number of nodes. And then as we are finishing it, we made this observation about what kind of form there is in the center for each of the um, even numbers and the odd numbers. And the odd numbers giving you kind of a polyhedron center with as many edges as there are ends, and the even numbers giving you a kind of a starburst burst effect, and the starbursts, the lines, the spokes were equal to the number of ends. Um, and so for me, what was significant is being able to uh, visualize for someone when you ask them to um, identify the number of nodes or the number of things that they're juggling or working with in life, um, and then explain the formula and see the result. Well, this gives you a visual of what the result would look like. And when you get, you say 20, and the kind of beautiful maze that gives you, but it also represents the extreme kind of complexity and the exponential growth in the number of connections for every one node that you add uh, to what you're dealing with in your life system. And when I first tried this formula with somebody, and we counted up X number of ends, and we ended up with a complex sort of number of connections like we're seeing. The very first thing that the person said to me after I gave her the answer to how many relationships that she's dealing with, um, she said, "No wonder I wake up in the morning with a headache." Um, and that to me was a way that she confirmed her right to, um, if you want, the headache in dealing with the complexities of the life that she was dealing with. The other thing that we were able to do is to say, you only identified 2 or 3 nodes that were giving you a lot of trouble. The relationships uh, between those nodes were troublesome. When you see this diagram or the visualization, there's all kinds of other relationships that you're doing quite well at. And so it was a way to help someone realize that, yeah, maybe they're having a lot of primary kinds of troubles, but that's not taking away from all the things that they are doing well with the relationships in their life. Um, and it was a sense of, if you want, optimism, or a sense of reassurance that they weren't, a total failure, or they weren't bad, or they weren't good enough. They were actually handling the complexities of life in a very adequate way, except for maybe 2 or 3 that were giving them serious kinds of difficulties. That way you could then work with them in the sense of, let's honor what you're doing well, and then let's focus in on whether we can help you change those things that are not going so well. And I think this visual would be a great um, assistance to someone trying to understand this complexity of their living system.
I really love that, Richard. And you pointed out something that most people don't point out. Yes, you're having trouble with this relationship or that, but look at how many relationships you're handling.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very positive set of feedback. The other, I think, would be to show somebody, put the nodes on the paper, and then have them draw how many connections they see.
Right.
Label each node. This is my father, this is my mother, this is my boyfriend, this is my school
Yeah.
teacher,
Yeah.
whatever. And then draw those lines and then play this graph and say, oh, I think you're missing a few.
Yeah.
This is how complicated life really is. And you're doing great. Yeah. Anything else that you want to say about that?
Well, you zeroed in on the very thing that I was getting out of the original understanding of the formula, and trying to turn it into a way of understanding someone's social life situation. And you're quite right that when you list the nodes and name them and then draw connections, very often some of the connections won't show up. You'll miss them. Um, and then when you do show them up, they can see the increased complexity, and they can also see more of what they're doing well against what they're supposedly not doing as well with.
Very cool. Are you kind of complete, Richard?
Yeah.
And so I'd like to add that, you know, these days, whether you like Elon Musk or not, over the last 15 or 20 years, he went from PayPal into Tesla, into X, into a boring company, into a Grok company, into a robot company. And the way he solves problems, he went to Russia to try and buy rockets. He thought, well, they've got rockets there, we can buy them. Every time he went back to talk to them, the price went up because Russia thought, oh, this guy's really this guy's a buyer, so he's going to buy. So they, instead of lowering the price and saying, how many are you going to buy? Let's give you a discount. They kept raising the price, thinking he's a motivated buyer. So Elon stopped and he started making a chart. He just put all the dots down. What does it? Let's go to first principles. What does it take to build a rocket? And he simply put all the nodes on a piece of paper and started connecting dots, and realized that he could build the parts cheaper than he could buy them. And I think that that's kind of a great model for entrepreneurship as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you listen, I listened to a podcast today about AI, robots, batteries, the future of fuel and power systems in the United States, from nuclear to solar to wind and to ocean. And it's a very complicated situation we're in. And I'm one of these guys who wanted to leave one of the nodes out, you know. I'd like to leave out nuclear, for example. But as I look at each node has its benefits and each node has its liabilities. And while
Yeah.
nuclear is not the solution to everywhere, everything all at once, it could be the solution for one node of the problem. And so by looking at it in terms of first principles, one can get rid of biases and take a look at objective realities. So there's something that you may or may not relate to. And I'm kind of holding Manu back. It's his birthday, and what Richard and I noticed was this idea that odd numbered diagrams have a different center than even numbered diagrams. That odd numbered diagrams seem to have a polygon in the center whose number of sides equals the number of nodes, whereas even numbered diagrams have a starburst in the center where the spokes in the starburst are equal to the number of nodes. And I threw that out to Manu when he came on the call, and immediately he came up with some inspiration. So Manu, what are you seeing when you see all this go on, my friend?
Okay, I'll get back to, I got one of your sentences, first principles, when you were talking about Elon Musk. What is the first principle here? In the beginning, what do you have?
A node.
Okay, but what is the node? Is it the giver or is it the receiver?
It's a something.
It's
In
either
my
the
opinion,
observer or the observed, right?
in my opinion, in the beginning, there's love, there's the giver. Gives all over. The IVM is giving all over. All direction, I'm giving. In the beginning, there's radiation. So I'm there, I'm just constantly giving. And then all of a sudden, there is, in that universe, somebody was aware. So I give one, I reject. When somebody's aware, there are two. I start having a loop. a giving and receiving, a 2. Then I continue giving. Then there is a 3rd. But what creeps in that is very important is that for us to have any meaningful communication, there need to be a structure. The 3rd immediately implies a triangle. It is structure. And when you have a triangle, what does it mean? What does structure mean? Structure means there are phases. There's a sequence. There are phases that come in sequentially to make sense. To talk about the triangle, this is a triangle. This phase first, then it turned that phase, and then it turned that phase to me. This and that don't happen at the same time. Right? This phase, that phase, that phase. So at 3, we loop into an organized structure relationship.
2-dimensional.
At 4 is my turn to continue giving. Because remember, all of this is rhythmic. It's like playing guitar. 1 note, 2 notes don't come, they will muffle each other. So I'm playing, at 4, I give. So I'm concave. I'm radiating. I'm a star. At 5 again, we loop again into a polygon. And continuously. It is pulsative. That's the way I see it. Relationships are dynamic. They are, if you want them to work, they have to be rhythmic.
Yeah.
And if they are rhythmic, that means that they are phases. It means that if Steve is talking and I'm talking, we don't hear each other. Because you need the sound to go from one to the other. The other person receives, then processes, then give back.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're getting at, from my perspective, is that the formula tells you the single connection between each node. But if there is a dynamic, the give and the take, then it's got to go both ways. And
Yes.
when that happens, you then remove the divide by 2. And so now the complexity of the dialogue, if you want, the given and taking back and forth, goes from 190 to 380 if you had 20 nodes.
Yes.
And so that to me is another addition to the beauty of the kind of human connections and the complexity of same. And this kind of diagram for me too also helps to elucidate the difference between complexity and complicated. And
Yes.
and complexity is still something that one can marvel at, can deal with, can experience, can manage in many ways. And so we can go from complexity back to what might be the minimum, as you were just describing, which I now call a simplex. And what I learned from David Bohm's readings in terms of the phasing, as you're describing, you can have a sequential phasing, as many as you want. But if you get it out too far, it starts to become hard to manage. But David Bohm was helping me understand, then I can enfold it back to what might be the minimum number of phases. And my conclusion from the tetrahedron system is the minimum number of phases has to be 3 or 4. And then as I become more and more comfortable with the methodology or the phases of, say, the organization or the system, I can then unfold them out further and further to the point where if I'm a veteran, you can give me 1,000 phases, and I understand how they all go together and what has to be done in order to build or carry out an instruction within the organization or the system. So I can go from out to a lot of complexity. If I get sort of frightened or scared, I can enfold it back to a level that I'm comfortable with, and I can take it all the way back to the minimum 3 or 4 if I have to. And that really gives people then in the systematic side of systemic work more confidence in being able to handle a new set of tasks or phases, or to switch from one job to another and get up to speed as quickly as possible. You can use this kind of modeling to build up your knowledge base and your practice base or your skill base much more quickly than you might if you were just trying to rote memory it all. The structure will give you guidance in how to unfold and work with the necessary number of phases.
And this,
Exactly.
Richard,
You know,
and this, Richard, goes right back to what I said about entrepreneurialism and first principles.
Yes.
Identify all of the nodes. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Manu.
okay. Richard said 2 words there: complexity and complication. Right?
And
Mhm.
simplicity.
Complexity, yes, yes, but let's just come. Even complexity, you have a map, you have a structure. A structure is a map. Okay?
Yeah.
Complication is when you have lost your map. It doesn't mean the map doesn't exist. You have lost your map. Let's say you are
Right.
going to a place in the old ways that we used to have. We used to have those books, the thick books with the map of area, right?
Yeah.
You trace it, you went from one page to the other, that's the way. There wasn't any Google Maps to guide us. It was just on that thing. You had your thick book, and you needed your partner on the side. You're driving, either your kid or your wife is looking at that and say, okay, that's where we take. And then you follow the highway, you take off ramp and all of these things to go to your place.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
And
okay.
the
Now,
map didn't show the ruts in the road.
Yes, yes. That was complex, but it was also simplex. It was complex, but it was effective into taking you to your destination.
Right.
If you lost your map, then you start creating entropy. You create a lot of noise that fog you matter a lot. A lot of fog around you can see.
Yeah. And it gets
so that's
complicated.
that's what it is. And the simplest structure then is even simpler than the triangle. It is me and you. Can we talk? Can I converse with you, Richard, in an intelligible way? Intelligible means I listen to you when you talk, and you listen to me when I talk, and I give you the space to talk.
Yeah.
That's what it calls phase. So I know how to shut my mouth and listen. And you know how to do same. That's the simplest.
And that's when you don't have to have the divide by 2 because you recognize the dialogue.
Yes.
And how
The
important
divide by 2 is only, like showing the balance of things.
Yeah.
But it has to be balance on balance for it to go. There got to be flow of energy.
Yeah. But
Otherwise,
it's showing you the minimum complexity with the number that you have.
Yes.
And then if you enter in a social sense, the dialogue part, then it increases by 2.
Yes.
Or,
and again, to what
doubles.
I say today, in the beginning of our solar system, it wasn't the planet. In the beginning, it was the sun. It was a burst out. Burst out is radiative. And then because it's radiative, burst out, then cools down, then gravity forms planet.
Absolutely correct.
Yes.
I want to throw something in right here, though, if I may. Hold your thought, Manu. This relationship of 2 nodes, there's a dialogue.
Yes.
But a dialogue does not always exist. If this person is a narcissist, or if they are authoritative in any way, then it's divided
Right.
by two. You only have a one-way communication.
Right.
Or if this person is a somehow depressed, doesn't own their power, they divide by two and say,
Right.
that node is bigger than me, I'm going to shut up.
Right.
And
Yes.
so
I
there
differ. Yes. Sorry.
there is a division by two created by lopsided relationships, and it's very important to protect this mutual respect.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Manu.
The division, to me, I differ a little bit in the interpretation of division by two. Division by two is not offensive, it's not anything else. It only recognizes what you call principle of equivalence. We are in conversation. So I am a participant, I am a node in the conversation, Richard is the node of the conversation. We are equivalent. So when I send to Richard, I expect a return from Richard of no less value than what I sent you. Of no, there is no, it is a pure. So once we have that, in terms of counting, we can say that my relationship to Richard is the same as the relationship to me. Therefore, for simplicity, we divide by two.
Okay.
It's not, it doesn't mean that it demeans anybody else.
Well, when you're complete on that, I'd like to offer another point of view on that too. But I don't want to
Yes.
interrupt you.
No,
on
I'm
that.
true, Steve.
Okay, good. So let me give you another point on this, because as I considered what Bucky was doing when he started developing his charts, um, I saw something strange happen. In other words, I said, why, when Bucky does his charts, does he identify only half of the relationships? And of course, it's the divide by two. We have A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D.
Mm.
And as it goes down diagonally, we have A, B, B, C, 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 D. When Bucky describes his tetrahedral relationships, he describes this side of the chart. He doesn't describe this side. And what I've kind of come to is that this is convex or concave, and then this one is the opposite. Because A can relate to B, but A may not allow B to relate back to them. That would be this kind of domineering, narcissistic, tyrannical approach. A needs to allow B to have equal time. And unless that happens, it's one half. It's half the charts over here and half the charts over there. I just thought I'd throw that out. Any comments there?
Yes, the comment is this one. When Bucky describes his system, he's describing them in a pure principle way. What you are describing there is the anti-anthropic, or the attempt of anti-anthropic that we do copying nature. But if there's any notes in your set that believes that it is special, then it throws everything away. There's a spanner in the relationship, and then it's not going to fulfill what it was meant for. There's not going to be dialogue. Okay. You get what I say? When Bucky is describing things, it is in pure principle, meaning that there's equivalence of a node is a node. It's not a special node. It's just a node in a set. It's one of those spheres. That's what it is. So therefore, it respects the other nodes in an equal way, all of them. The relationship is that. You call that symmetrical relationship. Now, if in what we are building, in our social structure, remember in social structure, we build, we try to mime what is in nature, and we're building. But if there is one ego in our set, it's not going to work. Because the ego is going to get the energy and stock it, not realizing that by storing energy, it's going to explode and smear the remainder of the structure that we're trying to build.
Okay, and
what you're doing there is when you have a diagram or a model, a physical model of a tetrahedron, or even the the picture that Steve has just put up, then it's easy to be able to count the 6 between the nodes. But when you take it into, in a sense, a social context, and you have that dialogue idea going back and forth, then you can see the 6 double to 12 very quickly because it has to go back and forth. But then I think what Steve has really added to this is that when you have a different characteristics, if you want, on one end or the other, or you have a different culture engaging with another kind of culture, if there is not that respect back and forth, then you get it back to a single line again. And it now just becomes what I tell you you have to do. And it also points out the significance of what Bucky has always been trying to say about over specialization and over authoritativeness, and the idea that I should subjugate myself to your higher wisdom or your higher skill or your higher ability, and or the other side is forcing me to buy into that notion that you have to leave it to me. I'm omnipotent. I will solve all your problems for you. And when that happens, then the single line notion comes back into play. So you could have, in a social context, you could have some relationships that are single lines, and you could have others that are in that respectful dialogical back and forthness. And so even though the minimum number might be, if you had 20 things, is 190, and the maximum could be double that, then there's probably some flexibility in between in terms of which number of connections are operating ideally in the way they should, and which ones are operating in a dominating and oppressing way. Or I think, again, what you were saying, Steve, is that somebody, because of a state of mind, let's say, has given up their agency. And even though I haven't turned it over to you, the vacuum in the fact that they've given it up accelerates the other side to sort of say, oh, I can now fill that vacuum and I can take over your life for you.
And many times, Richard, they do it out of a false sense of savior.
Yes.
In other words,
Yes.
this person needs me
Yes.
to disempower them because they are powerless and I
Right.
can help them. And as
Right.
soon as I think I can help somebody, I just screwed them up.
Right.
I just probably violated their franchise, that sacred
Yes.
franchise to choose.
Yeah.
Good.
And to me, that's what Bucky was getting at, is if we abdicate to the notion of the specialist is the answer to all of our problems, then that's exactly what's going to happen. And in some cases, we're going to be party to our own oppression, because we're
How
going
do you think that the Nazi succeeded in doing that stuff? It's always been like that. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, people are usually reluctant of the effort. They are lazy. Let's just put it that way. And then they look forward to something to follow.
Yeah.
Okay? It takes work to be able to lead or to choose. So they want something to follow, and some very, very bad guy get organized and have masses. It's not because those guys are naughty. It's just that it's nature. That's the way they are. And then it leads to things like history has shown, where millions and millions, and we saw that in Holocaust, we saw that in Rwanda, we saw that in many other, we saw that in Cultural Revolution in China. It's all over the world. It's not painted into one race or whatever. It is just there. That's the way we are. It is that there's a requirement that we spend time like we're spending now, and that we've been spending for a long time, each person here, to try to understand what Mother Nature is telling us. It's telling us, hush, 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 hush. But we are intrepid. We want to do our things. Unfortunately, we don't want to give. We don't want to spend in order to achieve what we set to do or what people set for us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the other thing that I'm dealing with now, and a program that's going to be presented in the early part of June is the power of mythology, and how the mythology of storytelling reinforces over time certain ways of dealing with things. And for me, um, one of the greatest mythologies that persists in our lifetime is this notion that um, the sun is rotating around the earth, so therefore we get this sunset, sunrise phenomena. Um, and it was 500, 600 years ago that we realized through Galileo and others that that wasn't true. It's this our spinning on the surface of the earth that creates the image that the sun is doing the moving, um, and and yet we we don't give up on that mythology. That mythology is so deeply embedded in us as people and cultures that to give it up is 500, 600 years in the making. And then I take it to my area of of suicide, and we have myths that have been built around um, that aspect of one's living. Um, and we have things like, well, you can't ask somebody directly about that experience in their life, because if they're not thinking about suicide, you may have put the idea in their head, and and you could then cause them to become suicidal, and then you might be liable if you want. So to protect yourself from that, you avoid saying anything, or you change the subject and work on a different kind of problem. And and so we've argued for 50 or 60 years that that myth is not true. It's false. Um, but we haven't got it out of the mainstream thinking. They still will fall back to that particular myth, and there's others too. But um, and so people like me who's been in this work for 40, 50 years, I can get frustrated and say, oh, it'll never change. If I put it into context, I can then put it in this other context and say, well, 500, 600 years have gone by and we haven't changed that other perception. So maybe we got to give this one a little bit more time. But it does come back to the the uh, uh, the problem or the complexity of why is it so difficult to get a belief that's embedded um, out of us and either changed, or to realize that there's both, and that as as um, as we've been talking about the concave and the convex, there can be good and bad about any sort of particular skill or ability. Um, and and if we misuse it, then we can, if you want, create the continuation of a myth that's outdated, or we can cause more difficulties than we intended to cause. So that to me is the power of mythology, the power of storytelling, the power of beliefs is amazing, both in that larger context of changing our thinking about whether the sun is doing the moving or the earth is doing the moving, and it takes it down into our own sort of social systems and belief systems that can be helpful, but they can also be a hindrance, and they can get in the way of the intention of the giver, if you want. Yeah.
I want for Manu to talk a little bit more, but I want to add something in before we get too far off of this topic. Because I think, Richard, that what you're talking about is more significant than most people think. Having been certified as a clinical hypnotherapist and completed that education, what I realize is there's a thing called selective amnesia. And there are other things called hypermnesia. And what I've discovered is that this problem of continuing to say sunrise and sunset actually creates brain fog. In other words, if I will demand from myself that I no longer speak an untruth, no matter how practical it is, if I demand from myself that I will not speak an untruth, that affects my brain.
Mm.
And if I have the discipline to call it sunsight instead of sunrise, and call it sun clips or dusk or dark or something when the sun when the earth rotates around so the sun is no longer visible, if I would develop that discipline, I would develop my brain in such a way that I would see the disconnects in other parts of my language and in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is so in fact, people right now listening to this might say, you're crazy. What? Hey, it's a matter of convenience. We've been doing it forever. Let's just keep doing that. Let's clean up other aspects of our lives. But I've discovered that unless I am absolutely integrous and unforgiving with myself in terms of being explicit with my words, I create a brain fog. I actually create a hole in my brain that allows me not to see other things that are just as obvious,
Mm-hmm.
but are much more practical, much more powerful, much more uh, that could be much more dominant in my life. So I really wanted to say that while we're having this discussion, and I rest my point here. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. Can I,
Yeah, Manu, I'm ready
can
for
I
you.
come in here?
Go for it.
Yes, I put in the chat the book, title of book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. It was a book that was published about in the 40s, 1940. It's still, I'm sure you know about the book, Richard.
Yes, as a matter of fact, in this program that's coming up in June, one of Joseph Campbell's sort of disciples is going to talk about the whole significance of mythology and in our lives and our cultures. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the second point that I want to emphasize on is the word education. Education is from educe. It means to draw out. It doesn't mean to put in, it's to draw out.
Mm-hmm.
The whole education should be to help the set of methods that help the young people to gain an ability to drawing out from their potential out into the universe. So education is radiative. Now the myth is local and the myth is gravitation. Myth, culture, everything. Heuristics, all of this connotation is a set of things that have been practiced or whatever or thought about and then meant to be ingrained into cohort of members of society to preserve or to enforce some beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
And
Okay?
that's why in what I've learned over the years in the work that we've been doing is that even though we might our organization is called Living Works Education, but our instructors are not called educators. Um, they're not called instructors. Um, they're called trainers, and that's probably an incorrect word because what they're trained to do is to be facilitators. In other words, they're trained to do what you just said is what education's all about. It's not putting in, it's drawing out.
Okay.
It's helping people uh, bring their own sense of agency and self out into dialogue with others. And out of that, they learn from each other. They don't learn necessarily from the instructor.
Okay. And the third point that we know is a general relationship. The general is that locally, that is culturally, gravity is at least twice stronger than radiation. So it means that in order to educate, we have to put in energy effectively and efficiently in order to overcome those weights
Mm.
of a customs, of a culture, of a thing, of identity. You know, I am a Black South African. That's who I am. Or even here in South Africa, I say, I am an African. And then we say, the white guy is Afrikaner.
Mm.
You see? And then we say, he's Indian. He's Indian. South African Indian. And we say of some people, yes, colored. That is mixed. That's the way we describe things here. But all of those are culture. And they are so strong because people identified to them in order to build social structures. And that's why they don't work.
Yeah.
Because they didn't observe the first principles from the beginning. I'm
Yeah.
true of this. Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts and comments? I want to come back to ideas that Manu had about the convex and concave, looking at the diagrams. So can we look back at those diagrams again and talk about this a little bit more? Okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
All right, good. I'm going to show a diagram. I think what I'll show my screen, except I got a lot of stuff going on my screen here because I've been doing a lot of stuff here. Okay, I can still show my screen. And I'll just have a little discipline. I don't know if that's possible for me, but this is the chart. Hang on. It should appear here in a moment. Yeah. Here's the chart of a 19 node picture. And I think that maybe I can actually show the 19 and 20 side by side. Because have you spent enough time, Manu, talking about that center hole? I would like you to talk about that center.
Well, at that point, that center is receiving
That
from the
center is
surrounding
what?
world, receiving energy.
Okay, well, we have a 19 node
And then
center.
at 20 is change phase, is given. That's why you have a starburst. So if you
Okay,
look at that center, if you do at that center as a point, as a local, you see that the stars are sending energy into that are hitting the center at different angles. And that energy is coming in. It is receiving. It is a receiver at that point. And then at 20, it is a radiator, a giver. So
okay, so
remember,
which one is convex and which one is concave in your estimation?
the concave is the 19. The convex is 20.
Cool. Let's talk about that for a couple minutes. How do you feel about that, Richard? Do you have anything come out of that? Because I'm in big time discovery here.
No, I want to digest that some more because of trying to understand or put my understanding of concave and convex together. Whereas you've got one side sort of the mirror of the other side. So one is curvature out and the other one's curvature in. So I need a little bit more of a dialogue to see one of them as concave and the other one as convex.
I love the idea that one is radiating
Yes.
and which one did you say is convex or concave, Manu?
The 19 is
19
concave.
is
Concave.
concave. It's the round thing.
Yes,
It's a
it is
black
receiving
hole.
energy. It is receiving energy.
It's receiving.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Black hole.
gravitational.
Yeah, Lee
On
has
the-
commented that it's
on
a
the-
black hole.
Yes, in the
See-
in the 20 is radiating, is the sun.
See, for me, number 19 is it's being held. Something's being held by all the interconnections. And then, as you say, on 20, it looks like there's sort of a convergence and then a radiation out.
But Richard, in a relationship, in a conversation, everything, we have what you call sequence now. So if I'm an individual participating in a conversation or in an exchange, there's a time when I hold, and there's a time when I give. When I'm listening, I'm holding. It's coming in, and then I'm taking the time to process it in order to give a feedback that is intelligent. Otherwise, just disorder. So it's like, when you get into a brawl or you go in a bar, like in an English pub, when there's a soccer match. Everybody's watching a soccer match and everybody talking, screaming, expressing the thing. It's not sequenced. But a sequence one will have been like, there's an environment where they are in there. And there's a time when they watch something and then there's a stop, pause, and then they give the feedback. It requires energy to structure it that way. It requires a lot. It's
Okay.
concave.
I have another question for you then about concave and convex.
Yes.
I designed this chart over these interrelationships. This shows from cosmography, and it's talking about the thinkable set and the
Yes.
idea of how thoughts are organized. Here's your tetrahedron, here's your relationships, your nodes and your interrelationships. The nodes are labeled A, B, C, D. The interrelationships are 1 through 6. That's how Bucky decided to label them. When he labeled as ABC, I'm going to repeat myself here just for a moment. He labeled AB, BC, CD, AC, BD, AD. When I built the chart, I noticed that he's going AB, AC, AD, BC, BD, and CD. Let me see, AC. Yeah, AC, but he goes this way: AB, BC, CD, then AC, BD, then AD. That's the way he listed it. I sat and pondered this, and I thought, now why did he do that? Because here's this chart that I've shown you that shows the chart relationship with the A squared, B squared, C squared, D squared going down the center, and that if I break this chart up, then one of these becomes concave and one of these becomes convex. I would say one of them is the visible set, the other is the non-visible set. Manu, which one is concave and which one is convex? Is A, B, C, B, C, C, D, AC, BD, AC? Is that the concave or is that the convex?
Let me get into a metaphor here and try to make sense of what you're saying. Right?
Okay.
That thing is a bird, huh?
It's what?
A bird.
A bird.
Oh, yes.
Oh, because it has wings?
Yes. It has 2 wings and it has the vertebrae that is
Okay.
from back. Now, for the bird to exercise what he was created for. He has to fly. Okay? And you are at the middle there. You are sitting as an observer on the axis where you have A, B, B, C, C, or A1, A1. Okay? When the bird, the wings flap like that, which wing are they all left? Or is it one that is left and other one that is right of you?
I don't know.
You must know. You are sitting there on the axis, and you
Well,
are
you
sitting
and I are
and you are
looking at the
seeing the
same.
bird. You are seeing the bird beating the wings like this, up, down, up, down, up, down. They all go up and down, but one is left, one is right. But you need both for the bird to fly.
Yeah.
That would be my answer to you. I'm not going to say which one is convex or which one is concave because you need both to work. It's just a representation of something that is tangoing. I'm seeing the tango. I don't know which one is the left step or the right step of any partner.
Okay.
Did
Well,
did I confuse you more? Or did I make some? Or was there some progress?
Well,
Well,
I think what Steve has done there is that he's shown um, the uh, the the one way, the one combination, and then he's shown the converse. So instead of AB, there's a BA, and an AC, there's a CA. And that to me speaks to this question of the minimum number of connections. So that the A1, B1, C1, D1 sets up the minimum 6. If you did it the other way around, you could still get the minimum 6. But in order to have both, which is a two-way street, you end up doubling your 6, and you would end up with 12 interconnections, because it would be my connection to you and then your connection to me and all the way around. Which is where we come back to being able to eliminate the division by 2. So for me, what Steve has done is on the top or the bottom, it doesn't really matter, I guess. He is showing how the formula works, n times n minus 1 divided by 2.
exactly.
When you include both of them, then you take off the divisor and you get n times n minus 1 would equal 12 instead of 6.
Right on. And you all
Let
understand.
me ask you another question, Steve, then.
Okay.
When you solve for the quadratic equation, right? Something like x to the square plus something ax plus equals 0. And then you have two solutions. One has its solution. One is positive and one is negative. When you say, okay, let's not consider the negative. Let's just take the positive as a solution to this, as the root solution to this. Does it mean that you are saying that that negative doesn't exist? Or you're just saying that for practical reason that we are looking now, okay, it's not going to be necessary. What are you saying?
I'm not saying any, I'm not drawing any conclusions. I'm just saying that when I look to understand how Bucky labeled his nodes, for some reason he chose to do the upper right-hand side of that table the way I drew the table. And he chose not to explain the
Yes.
lower left side of the table.
Yes. I'm just saying that practically you ignore one at your own peril.
Practically what?
You ignore one. You ignore the concave, the one that is hidden, as you say, hidden at your own peril.
Oh, exactly right. But I also agree with Richard that this is the result of divide by 2. And if I don't divide by 2, I see both sides of the bird. When I do divide by 2, I have a very practical way to look at the relationship, but it might be lopsided.
See, we always talk about the torus, but we know that is a fake. It's not real. It's not the way. It's not correct way. There's no torus that exists on its own.
Yeah, it's just the way energy manifests itself.
It's always a double torus, always.
Yeah.
But we say the torus.
And I also use this, Manu, to come to 1440. Because we had 360 over here, we have 360 over here, but then as we go down through these, we end up with 1440 if we do the squares in the middle. This comes back to the belt trick, Dirac's belt trick, and it comes back to the 720 manifesting itself. So, and you all got what these red arrows here are doing, right? They're showing the order in which Bucky identified or named the rows of numbers. So anyway, so I just thought I would share that, and this is some meditation that went on a couple years ago when we were doing cosmography, and
I've given an interpretation here and some stuff here. I will just say it. I say that axis there is the axis of spin.
you say what?
Okay, the axis that you have there.
Yeah.
AA, BB, CC, GD.
Yeah.
Is the axis of spin of everything. Everything spins.
Yeah.
And then the side is the phases.
This is the polarity right here.
Yes. And below that polarity is day. Above the polarity is night.
Yeah.
You understand why I say day and night? Day is what we see.
Right.
Night is what is hidden.
Yeah, that's why I have a subvisible set.
Yes. And then it
visible
will,
set and subvisible set.
yes. And it will, because the spin is going to alternate. Remember that I am an observer. I'm supposed to be detached. I imagine myself out of that and I'm looking at the stuff from a vantage point of view. So it's going to spin, and then what was night previously in the previous phase becomes day to me. And then alternatively, that's what they define phase. So that's the way I understand that stuff. And that's the way I link it to dynamics of Bucky. So you have anything that move, any system has the axis of spin, always. Earth has it, sun has it, everything spins. And then because the thing is spinning, and then there is an axis there of a set. That axis now, and then there are different kind of local things of that set that are, let's just say B2. B2 will then gravitate, that is rotate. That is the second dimension of the degrees of freedom. B2, you see A2, you take a point, Steve, C2, right? Okay. C2 will turn and become C1 in the relationship. So my interpretation of that from this diagram, I can already start defining and getting into the degrees of freedom, linking it to physics, linking it to what we can experience. You have the axis of spin, you have the rotation. So I've already described the spin, and now I've described the orbiting. Because the orbiting, look, if you look at that, BA, that is at the bottom, it is, in terms of its radius to the axis of spin, is shorter than that of C2, isn't it? Even of CA. You see BA, Steve?
Yes.
BA is closer to the axis of spin than DA, isn't it?
Yes.
So when it spins like that, DA becomes AD at the top there. You see that you have already the planets that are rotating around, orbiting, the sun, say for
Yeah.
example. You get me? So I've
Yes.
described the spin and the orbit. And I can fold that further to describe the compression and the expansion. That's another degrees of freedom. I can do a lot of things with. Because if I start folding those wings like this, I'm describing the compression. If I open them, I'm describing a radiation, compression radiation. That's already a third degrees of freedom, a third degree freedom. Now I can take that thing and I apply a twist onto it, fold it again. It's a sheet of paper. You've developed it to the most extent. Now you fold it counterclockwise on top and clockwise at the bottom. You have a torque. We'll describe 4. Then you can say by the same token that the bottom part transmutes into the upper part by poking. That is 5. Okay? And then you can infer precession in a way that you fold it like this, and then you bring AD towards the axis perpendicularly of spin. That becomes precession. So
Wonderful.
from one expression of expanded on what you call 2 dimension, I have linked it to the physical things that we know, that we describe of the celestial bodies doing dynamically. That's what I did. That's what I did on one of my old writings here. I went speculating and doing those things. I took that and I did, here. It was here. The same thing that you have seen. I went into this is my notes. It should be in my book somewhere. But I'm less passionate about my book than Steve. Steve has a lot of passion for his book. But I went through that and then I described the whole these things, to the torque and to the precession. That way, just by folding. So
Yeah,
you have a set that is spread out on a sheet. You do like Steve did, the relationship between them. And then now you start playing with those relationships. They relate, they are moving. And they create different things that you can identify as vectors for communicating energy from one to the other. They will communicate. If AD want to come close to BA, for example, it will have to have a talk. Otherwise, just spread is always going to be away. It needs to find a way to convey energy from it to that. And we do it different ways. We do it via technology, it's leveraging. Because the overall relationship, the overall thing that governs all of these things, encompassing everything, is leverage. God works with leverage. I'm talking about generalized leverage.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about the wings, because I like that sort of metaphor, because when the wings are flapping, and you spoke of compression or precession, the flapping of the axis of the wings creates a perpendicular motion to move the spine forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the the dynamic of an axis of this kind creating motion of this kind.
Mhm.
Is that um,
But the real
correct or accurate?
I think that the wing is for balance at the top in air. What creates what push forward is the tail. The tail does this.
Oh, the tail is a fish tail. The tail is a
Yes, the
zigzag.
propeller. Yes,
That's right.
the propeller is always the tail.
But it's still moving it perpendicular to the axis of
Yes,
the
it
wing.
does. It does the perpendicular. That thing
Yeah.
has to go to 720 degrees for it to make sense to move. So
Yeah.
the wing do this, but the tail is doing that at the back. Therefore, the reaction, creating a reaction and propulsing forward.
Yeah. That's why fish have tails.
Yes, and
Because
that's
they
why
move.
birds have tails. And that's why we paddle when we swim.
Yeah.
Our legs are doing a
And
motion.
and
Your
tails
hands
are
are
like
doing this.
tails are
Yes,
like a rudder.
yes. Your hands are doing this when you swim. When we swim, it's the same stuff. You are doing this, but your legs are doing that,
Mm-hmm.
or they are doing that to propel you forward.
But
If
I
you
think
just
the thing that's really important that is seldom talked about in any kind of understandable detail in a classroom of kids is to appreciate what precession is all about, and how the axis of in one way helps create motion perpendicular, and as you say, and then when you add in the advantage of the tail, then it actually provides an acceleration of the movement that is still perpendicular to the axis of, in this case, the wings.
very few people understand precession, even
Yes,
today. Very few.
right.
They understand torque, they understand spinning, they understand compression, expansion, they understand poking, they understand orbiting, but they don't understand precision. It is something very subtle. It is because precision is a compound.
Well,
It is a
this is the
compound of
thing that
things.
was interesting for me when I first learned about precession. I was able to apply it to the axis of people in a helping relationship, and how they had to be in a zigzag back and forthness in order to create the motion from problem to solution perpendicular to that axis.
Yeah.
And then I claim it was Steve, he denies this, but at one of our sessions, I think it was the one with Kelly, he introduced the other 5 motions. And I thought, I've never paid any attention to those other 5. And when I went to those 5, I could find ways in the modeling that I was working with to see orbit, to see in and out, to see expression and expansion and contraction, to see torque, and all of a sudden I had a model that incorporated all 6 motions, not just the one that I had learned. And so I had learned about precession in reverse to what you're saying a lot of people understand. They understand orbiting, they understand spinning and so forth. I came to the understanding of those 6 through precession first.
You see this? You see this book? You see the signing?
Yeah,
Can you read?
yeah.
Do you know who gave me this book?
Well, Kelly, it says
Yes. And do you see the date?
2010.
Yes.
Are you that old, Manu? Is that
No,
your,
2010,
are you
2010.
15? Are you
You know,
15 years old today, Manu?
yeah. And let me tell you, this is it. Remember that Kelly is born in April, eh? You know that?
He's what?
His birthday is in April.
Oh, yes.
And in April, Kelly gave me one of his dearest books, because this book, you can say I still have Kelly's notes inside. It is a book that is not a book that he bought to give me. It is a book that he used.
Which one is
And
it?
you stole it.
It's cosmography.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So still, Kelly, to show you his generosity, he used this book with all his notations, right?
Yeah.
I have the notation of Kelly here. You know, like his question mark, he doesn't understand some stuff. I have all of those here. And then
Wow.
he took that book, he flew to South Africa and gave me this book.
Do you know
Do you
something else
understand?
about
Do
Kelly?
you understand the significance to me?
Do you know one other thing you may or may not know about Kelly?
Tell me.
He grew up here in Calgary.
Yeah, I know that it's from Calgary. Yeah, I know that. That one I know.
So that's why he's either so smart, or that's why I'm so smart.
Yeah.
I
I'm
can
sure
see
it's the
that.
cow manure. It's the cow
Yeah.
manure in
It's the cow
Calgary.
manure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You understand that? I still have Kelly's
That's
notes.
wonderful.
So I have Kelly's and my notes here. And then this was, for example, this is, if you see this arrow, this Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that was just in order for us to laugh. But
Okay, well,
it shows.
we've gone plenty of time. It is now well beyond our appointed time. So let's go ahead and finish her up for Manu's birthday party here tonight. We've already sung. I'm going to go have a chocolate chip cookie, Manu, to celebrate when we get off the phone.
Sure.
But we'll let you end the call, Manu. Richard, how are you feeling? And what do you want to take it away from today? And please hand it back to me before we give it to Manu.
Well, there's an awful lot that we covered, and I'm really grateful for. I'm really grateful for the fact that you and I were able to play around with um, the visual and the animation and put the table in, um, and so on the other hand, in terms of Manu saying that today, his day right now, getting close to our day, May the 18th, is his birthday. It's also our wedding anniversary, and my
Wow.
son-in-law's birthday.
Wow.
Who was born on the very same day we were married, and in the same year. So
Wow.
a salute to May the 18th for all of us who have that date to celebrate things that are important in our lives. And so, yes, happy birthday to Manu for sure.
Thank you.
And I'm
Okay.
complete.
All right,
Over
good.
to you, Steve.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the
To Lee first.
I'm going to go first, and then you can end it off. If that's okay, unless you'd rather do it otherwise.
I say Lee. Lee hasn't been.
Oh, Lee's
Hasn't-
got, she
She's
has
gone.
a relative who had a plane wreck on a private
Okay.
plane, is in a hospital. She's taking care of family
Okay.
communications. So I'll go ahead and I'll let her know that you were interested in her reaction. She loved the graphic, Richard, that I've watched it several times. It's quite mesmerizing. And then to realize that it has some mathematical consequence in terms of personal relationships. You know, everything is connected. As above, so below. As below, so above. And it's a real opportunity to be able to use my brain to create metaphors to help understand principles that may be so vastly more significant than my little brain comprehends. but I'm sure delighted to be part of this. And I was excited to build that spreadsheet and delighted that I had still a few skills left to colorize it and stuff. So I'll make sure it goes out to everybody. I don't normally embarrass myself by singing for Goofy, doing my Goofy song, but I do it for all my grandkids, and the least I could do is sing it for Manu, and now the whole world that watches this video will know that will know about some of my crazies. The miracle of life boggles my mind. And I'm convinced that I think Manu mentioned in one of his outbursts that this radiation is the love, and we start with love, and I'm totally convinced with that. I'm totally convinced that the universe is love, and every part of the universe that individuates to have an experience is surrounded by love. You know, I've been doing a little study. I've been approaching this idea of creation from a non-sectarian point of view, and I've looked at it scientifically and looked at it through mythologies of Egyptian mythology, and of course the Hebrew mythology about the creation, and the Christian mythology. The Christian mythology about creation came from the Hebrew mythology, and the Hebrew mythology came from Egypt. And to see how it's so the same boggles my mind, and to think that I had to wait. I learned about the Kabbalion and this Egyptian idea and started connecting all these dots. I started with Joseph Campbell with his Power of Myth book, changed my life. It was so powerful for me back in the 70s or the 80s. I think when it came out was in the 80s. Anyway, it was so powerful. And I've given that to, I buy them on eBay for $1 to $5, and I give them away to family members and everything. I think the Power of Myth is so powerful to get people out of their box and to see how all the dots connect. And that's what we did tonight, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you, Manu, for having a topological brain. Thank you, Richard, for being so grounded in personal relationships. And you too manifest that love in everything that you say and do. So I'm just happy to be part of that. Manu, how are you feeling? Take it away, my friend. You end the call tonight.
Gratitude first. Really, I'm lucky, really, to be amongst people who can exchange freely, who can give. And the first thing that we had here is that I now say love, its definition is generalized giving. Love gives. Love doesn't take. Love gives. And that the gravitational that we see is the temporary pause of either respite or reorganizing. It is local, temporary local, but love is always, it's the only thing that is present everywhere. Is relationship. It is giving. It is flowing. And that's what I take away. And then with this also, I really reckon, and I would like here to say loudly of a role that Kelly has played in my life, in the life of many others, in being that guy that has offered himself to be the 0 point of conveying positive and constructive energy lines towards other people and edifying them to be able to contribute to their potential. So Kelly, thank you. Right. So I appreciate Lee that was here listening. And she has a keen sense, Steve, of quickly identifying the practical. I've noticed it. She doesn't intervene very much, but when she does, she picks up the essence of things. Sometimes we're lost in formulas, in complication, in mathematics, but the real person that is really wise and smart is a person that pinpoints that link, because we live. I always like Charles Bradley's, and say, Steve, he say, it takes love and understanding to live and to let live. It takes love and understanding to live and to let live. I'm sure you know the song, Steve. Why is it so hard to make in America by Charles Bradley.
I don't think I have.
Okay, listen, I will send it to link to you. It's beautiful. It takes love and understanding to live and to let live.
Yeah.
So otherwise, ciao, I'm sure that I'm going to be graced today with a lot of love. Thank you.
Amen.
Cheers.
Amen. Bye-bye.
Bye.